Welcome to episode 38 of the Most Serious Podcast. This is the first solo podcast episode that I'm recording on the show. This is something that I was thinking of doing for some time now. The idea behind recording this solo podcast episode is just to sit down and read about things, talk about things that I'm interested in, talk about topics that I am very curious about. Of course, there's so much value when it comes to having conversations with people from different walks of life, from different experiences, from different experts. But I also believe there is a certain value element to just sitting down and reading and talking about topics that you are interested in. I think that will personally help me lay out my thought process, my ideology, my philosophy behind those topics and why I'm interested in them, and also to give a perspective and also to understand some of those topics more deeply. So that's what I'm thinking. That's the intent behind this episode. Let me know, how do you feel about this? The topic for today's episode was Stoicism. I stumbled upon this philosophy of Stoicism maybe through a blog post or a YouTube video. I don't remember exactly, but I remember being attracted to the idea behind philosophy of Stoicism from the very start, and I thought that Stoicism is something which will allow me to not get affected by external factors of life, and which will make you so strong that you're able to navigate your way through life in a manner which allows you to be more calm, which allows you to be more resilient, and which allows you to look the storm in the eye and enter it. So that's what I thought about Stoicism, and that's what I thought it had to offer me. So I dug a little bit deeper and I thought of doing some research on Stoicism, its history, some famous Stoics, and I thought I'll record this episode and tell you guys also more about Stoicism and why I'm interested in it. So what I thought on the format of this episode is just I have some research done on this topic and I'll read through it and simultaneously talking about my thoughts on what is written here and just expressing my opinions. This might be a very short episode. Usually the episode length on this podcast is 40 to 45 minutes, but this might as well be 10 to 15 minutes. There's no finalized script, there's no finalized structure to these episodes. This is just a fun experiment that I'm trying. So let me know, what do you feel about this? Let's talk about Stoicism then. What is Stoicism? Who were the Stoics? Why did they come into the picture? How did they come into the picture? So the history behind Stoicism is that it was an ancient Greece philosophy. It was found in Athens by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BC. The name Stoicism comes from the Greek word stoa, which means porch or colonnade, where Zeno and his followers would meet to discuss philosophy. Stoicism was heavily influenced by early philosophies such as Cynicism, and it gained popularity in ancient Rome, where it was adopted by numerous famous figures including Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. So I heard about Marcus Aurelius once in a podcast only, and the person who was talking about him talked about how he was one of the most powerful men that have ever ruled on planet Earth. Like, he was one of the most powerful rulers that have existed in the history, and how he chose to live a life of simplicity. And by simplicity, I don't mean he didn't delve into or delve my vocabulary is of course not on point, so I don't know which one is it, but he lived a very disciplined life. And how strange or how different was it to have every pleasure at your disposal and not choose to indulge in it? So that was very interesting about Marcus Aurelius, and that's also something that I found super interesting about Stoicism in general. That does it mean you get that power inside yourself which allows you to almost look at all of these earthly pleasures that are around you, material possessions and everything, and have that level of detachment that you're not madly chasing them. So that's something about Marcus Aurelius that when I heard in that podcast, that immediately wanted me to have that kind of for myself, because it certainly feels like a superpower. Imagine if you had that level of calmness, resilience, tranquility, discipline, that you're not driven by external factors, you're not driven by material possessions. And that doesn't mean you don't go about doing your business. That doesn't mean you don't go about following your duties and your responsibilities. That was Marcus Aurelius all about. He was always behind the idea of performing your duties, performing your responsibilities right. So that's why I found this person very interesting, and I then bought his book called Meditations, where that was kind of like his personal journal, and he used to write about life, he used to write about his experiences, and then that after he died, then that journal became public and people are still reading it. It's been relevant from, I don't know, it's been almost like 2000 years, 1000 years, I don't remember what's the timeline on histories, but it's still relevant. We can talk about principles of Stoicism. At its core, Stoicism is a philosophy that emphasizes rationality, self-control, and a focus on what is within our control. The Stoics believed that the key to a fulfilling life was to focus on one's inner virtue rather than external circumstances or material possessions. They believed that a person should strive to live in harmony with nature and accept whatever happens with equanimity rather than resisting or resenting it. There is so much power into this ideology. If you can genuinely sit down and have that level of rationality, self-control, and a focus on what is within our control. If you can clearly define the things that are in your control and outside of your control, I believe that is an activity that almost effective immediately allows you to have a very clear distinction on what consequential circumstances are you a part of. How can you consciously choose to make your life better, and what are some things that you just don't have any control over, and there's no value in spending time analyzing, mulling over those things. If you don't have any control over them, then certainly there's no value thinking about them, crying about them, or just spending your time on them. And the last line on this text is, they believe that a person should strive to live in harmony with nature and accept whatever happens with equanimity rather than resisting or resenting it. So when I used to, I found this template for journaling on a Notion, on an app called Notion, which had, it was called a 3-minute journal, and it had multiple questions for the day and for the night. One of the questions on the nights section was, what was I resisting today, or what am I resisting today? And this is a question which I believe is very good to write or to journal about if you're doing journaling or thinking about your day. That what are you resisting today? And you know you're resisting something, but if you consciously sit and ask yourself, you might get an answer to where are you putting so much effort on resisting something which you know you should be doing, which you know feels right, which you know is something natural to you, but you are not following up on it. I believe that's a very good question to journal on. The Stoics also believed in the importance of self-control, and they saw emotions as a potential source of harm if left unchecked. However, they did not advocate for the suppression of emotions altogether. Instead, they believed in practicing a form of emotional detachment, where one could acknowledge their emotions without being ruled by them. And this is the difference between just bottling your emotions up and not processing them versus identifying that you're not your emotions. You're not your mind. If you've ever meditated or if you've ever had any experiences with mindfulness, then you come to realize that you're not your thoughts. Your thoughts come and go. Similarly, your emotions. Maybe your emotions could just be an extension of cumulative thoughts included with some intense feelings, and then you get emotions. So you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. That's just a state of being you're experiencing for some time. And for me, it was an experience that I had during one time I was meditating, where I realized that there actually is no, if you're able to detach yourself from your thoughts and see your thoughts, and this is a very simple exercise which you can do in mindfulness as well. If you can just see your thoughts, then you come to realize that if I'm able to see my thoughts, then I'm not my thoughts. And that allows us to practice that ideology that we can overcome our feelings and emotions and thoughts. Practicing a form of emotional detachment where you acknowledge your emotions but are not being ruled by them, that was one of the key principles of Stoicism. One of the most famous Stoic philosophers was Epictetus. He believed that people should focus on what they can control and let go of what they cannot control. In his book, The Enchiridion, I might be pronouncing all of these names wrong, he wrote, "Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, office, and in a world, whatever is not of our own doing." If you let this sink in, there is so much wisdom in this part of text only. He talks about things that are within our power are things that are of our own doing, things that we can produce on our own. Our actions, it is our feelings, it is just what's in our control. It is what we are doing on our own. This quote highlights the Stoic belief that we should focus on what we can control and not worry about things that are outside of our control. Epictetus believed that by accepting the world as it is and focusing on our inner life, we can achieve inner peace and happiness. Another famous Stoic philosopher, which I was talking about earlier, was Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor. He believed that people should live in accordance with reason and nature. In his book Meditations, he wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This quote highlights the Stoic belief that our thoughts and beliefs shape our reality. If we focus on negative thoughts, we will create a negative reality. But if we focus on positive thoughts, we can create a positive reality. Marcus Aurelius also believed that we should focus on the present moment and not worry about the past or the future. In his book, he wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about your neighbors unless with a view to some mutual benefit. To wonder what so and so is doing and why, or what he is saying or thinking or scheming. In a word, anything that distracts you from fidelity to the ruler within you means a loss of opportunity for some other task." Wow, this is actually so cool. This quote highlights the Stoic belief that we should focus on what we can do in the present moment and not worry about what others are doing or what may happen in the future. Marcus Aurelius had so many gems of wisdoms inside his personal journal, and it's so crazy to think about the fact that he never knew that it was going to be made public. These were just his thoughts. He wrote them in his personal private journal, and there are so many nuggets of wisdom inside Meditations, which is crazy how relevant they are in today's world as well. The Stoics also believed that we should cultivate virtues such as wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. These virtues are essential for living a virtuous life and achieving inner peace. Seneca, another famous Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about the virtues in his book On Benefits. He wrote, "The wise man is self-sufficient, for all external goods are like the rind, which gives flavor and attractiveness to the fruit, but is not essential to it." This highlights that external goods such as wealth, fame, and status are not essential to a virtuous life. The wise man can be happy and fulfilled without these external goods because he has cultivated the virtues within himself. So Stoicism, in a sense, it focuses so much more on understanding what is in our control and what is not, and then practicing what we know is in our control and what we know is our responsibility, and not worrying about or feeling anxious about what's not in our control. This is my take on Stoicism. This is something, also, of course, it's not easy to encapsulate everything that Stoicism is in a video or in a podcast or in an episode of 10-15 minutes. But I believe this is a start. This episode helps me to get better with every iteration on talking about topics, on discussing more interesting things through these solo episodes, and also having a more structured layout to them, or maybe an unstructured layout to them. We can figure that out through these episodes. Thank you so much for listening in. If you made it till here, this truly means a lot to me, and thank you so much for spending your time in listening to whatever rumblings I made in the last 15-20 odd minutes. I would love your feedback on this, since this is the first episode. This is the first solo episode that we've recorded, and we'll come back with something more interesting in the next episodes. Thank you. Thank you for listening.